Those of you that were having trouble using Designer, Gravit.io, we can take a look at Photopea. Some of you were having a little bit of difficulty using Photopea, but it is very similar to Photoshop like we used in the beginning of the year. To use Photopea, we're going to go to photopea.com, and then up in the top left corner, we're going to go up to File. We're going to go to New, and we're going to set up our document. You don't have to worry about these templates that have information inside of it. We're going to build our own template from a white document. So in the top left corner, I'm just going to rename my document. I'm just going to say Design. You can say Shapes if you want to call it Shapes. But we're going to set up our document to be set in inches. It's going to be set to 8 inches on width, 8 inches on height, and 300 dpi. 300 dpi is just, again, referring to dots per inch. It's understanding that it's going to be a higher res image, better quality than the default setting that was set at 72. Once I have these settings, I can see that my background color is white. I can simply hit Create. That sets up our document, and then we can get into building out our different shapes. When it comes into the shapes, there's a couple different tools. We've used them previously in Photoshop, but with Photopea, we're getting into modifying the shapes. We're going to take a look at the rectangular marquee tool. It's called rectangular marquee tool in Photoshop, but you can see just rectangular select in Photopea. If you click and hold on this icon, little dotted line, you see the ellipse select. Underneath of the rectangle and ellipse select, we have the lasso select and the polygon shape and the magnetic lasso tool. When it gets into using these tools, they are very similar to how we use them in Photoshop, but I will go over each of them just so you feel a little bit more comfortable. Down towards the bottom of the layers panel, on the left side navigation, if you see the little rectangle shape above the hand icon, the rectangle shape is full shapes that we can use. If I click and hold, you can see the rectangle tool, ellipse tool, line tool, parametric tool, and then the custom shape. The custom shape, you see the icon for the star, but we are going to set with the default that is 3-sided, so you'll get a triangle if you like. If I'm using these shapes, these are all going to create their own separate layers very easily, but editing the shape is going to be a little bit more difficult. So going into this, I'm going to take a look at the rectangle tool. With the rectangle tool, I can move over to my document. Down on the bottom left side, you can see the little magenta color on the top and then black on the bottom. That represents the colors that we have for the foreground and our background. If I wanted to switch them, move the black to the top, I can hit this little double arrow icon. But for right now, I'm going to leave magenta here. Or if I want to customize the color, make it something different, I can click right on the magenta color. It brings up the color picker. Then I can choose from either the default setting colors or go into picking out my own color along the slider on the left side. And click into the area, drag it over to blue, pick out green. But it's up to you what 2 colors you're going to use for the complementary colors for our first project. So my first color that I'm going to start with is red. Once I have red, I have to hit OK. Make sure you don't just exit out. It's not going to replace it unless you hit the actual OK. Then with the shape, right now I have the rectangle tool. If I click and drag, it's automatically going to create a rectangle shape. You see that it did not put in the red color here. Where the color of the shape is for this rectangle is at the top navigation. You see fill with a little light blue color. If I click on the drop down, I have the option of choosing out the fill where there's no fill. If I click on the no fill, you see that it takes away the color inside. I can go back to that light blue. I could do a gradient. I could do a pattern as well. But for this project, we're looking to do flat colors that are going to show complementary colors on the opposite side of the color wheel. So going back to that blue color, again, I can choose the red, green, blue, magenta. Again, I'm going to go to the red for this. Then I want to get into building out more shapes. Remember, we're going to have a minimum of 25 different shapes. Try to create variety, incorporate the principles of designs from patterns, repetitions of shapes to make this as interesting as possible. So if I wanted to get into drawing out another shape, I still have the shape tool selected. If I go into click and drag another shape, again, it's going to fill in with the last color I used. We see red up here. If I wanted to change that color out, we can think about the color wheel. So if I'm looking at the color wheel, I want to do the opposite color of red. We see red over the right side. Easy transition. We're looking to use a straight green color, not a light yellow green, not a blue green, but a straight green right across the color wheel from red. So if I want to change this color out, again, we only see this light color green. I can choose that, but if I want to customize it, I can click on this larger square, and then I can get that more standard green color. So we get those contrasts of red and green. You also notice that this green has a little red border right now. If I do not want to have a border, if I want to change the color border to that green color, I can click onto this drop down where it says stroke. I can modify the thickness of the stroke. So if I hit the drop down, I can make the stroke a lot thicker. Or I can change the color. Again, get into choosing out a different color. If I want to change the color itself, when I'm in the color picker, I can go to another area. So if I go over top of this red, it's automatically going to make that stroke red as well. But we're going to go back to that green color. Just getting the opposite of red. Then I have to click OK. So we see that we have a rectangle with red, rectangle with a stroke of green. Again, I can go into the other shapes, go down to ellipse. If I want to create a oval shape, I can click and drag, or if I hold shift, I can get a perfect circle. So you see that it replicates the last shape that we've drawn out. So again, using the rectangle tool or the ellipse tool, and go in, draw out another shape, and change out the color. Now I have that red again, but this time I don't want to have the stroke. So I can hit the fill with the X going through, none. And we see that we have a replicate image showing the green stroke on the two shapes and the red inside the fill of the other shapes. Shapes is that they are very restrictive of how you can get into modifying them. If I wanted to modify out this shape, I have to go up to edit, transform, and I can go to free transform to be able to modify it in many different ways. But it can be a little bit more obnoxious because if I wanted to try erasing out a section, say I wanted to try erasing out part of the middle of the shape, I can click and drag over the area. I can't simply just exit out. You see that it says layer is not editable. If I wanted to modify this shape, I have to go to the right side navigation, right click, and rasterize a layer. Once I rasterize a layer, it becomes another standard object on a layer. This way, if I wanted to cut it out, now I can hit delete in the area that I've drawn, and now we get a more modified shape. Rather than having to do that process, I may prefer to use the rectangle select. With the rectangle select, I can draw out the shape. It doesn't fill in the space, but if I want to fill in the space, I can either use the paint bucket tool over on the left side. So you see that I have red as my fill color, and with the paint bucket selected, it's where the gradient tool is shown. With the paint bucket, I can click inside the area and it fills in that space. Then I can go in with the rectangle tool again, draw out a new shape right on top, and then I can hit backspace to cut out the area. Or if I wanted to do a circle inside of it, I can undo what I just did for the rectangle, change my shape over to the ellipse select, and then draw out an ellipse shape and cut out that shape inside of the rectangle's red color. You can get into modifying a lot easier if you use the shapes tool rather than having to go over to the right side navigation and turn these shapes into rasterized images. The one thing you have to be careful of if you are using the rectangle or the ellipse select is that you have to create separate layers. You'll notice that I have these two shapes. In shape 4, I am seeing both of those shapes in that same layer because I never created a new layer. If I wanted to create a new layer, I have to go down over to the layers panel, down the bottom right side, click on new layer. Now we see that layer 1. Then I can draw in my shape and then look to fill in the space. Again, I have red, so I can use the fill color, click inside the area, and it fills in that space. Again, we can cut out areas, create a little bit more diverse shapes, mix them up, get into overlapping different layers. If I wanted to draw out ellipse over top of 2 red shapes, again, I want to make sure that I add in a new layer first. Then I can use the fill color or the paint bucket to fill inside that space. If I want to change out the color, I have to go down over the bottom left side where the red is. I can switch over to where the green section and then click inside the area to fill in that object. So make sure to click OK, then click inside. I chose white by accident, but I want to go back to the green. Now hit OK. Now we see green down the bottom. And I click inside that space. If I wanted to show a little bit of red that's hiding behind it, maybe I want to draw another shape that's over top, and then I can hit backspace to cut it out. Now we get that overlap of green on top of the red. I can use the move tool to move the shape where I want, change the location, create a little bit more interest on your shapes overall. If I wanted to get playing with the opacity of an object, over in the layers panel, you see layer 2. At the top right side, I have opacity, which is 100%. I can drop down the opacity to create that overlap of greens and reds. So you're getting a lot more interest in your work. If I wanted to attempt to use the Polygonal Lasso tool or the regular lasso tool, with a Polygonal Lasso tool, I like it because it has a little bit more control. With the Polygonal Lasso tool, I can click points, click a point left and right, maybe create a triangular shape. I just have to make sure to go back to where I started, and then I can use the fill with the paint bucket and fills in that space. Again, I was on that same layer, which I forget to do at times as well, but just you can always hit Control Z, undo, and then create a new layer. Then I can get into redrawing out that shape. And then I can use the paint bucket, fill in that space. And you see that it's 100% opacity because we created a new layer. I can always modify out the opacity again, put it down so we get the red seeping behind it. Or I can move the shape around. I can slide this shape over to the left or right, overlap. Again, we want to create something that's going to fill up this entire space. We have to have a minimum of 25 different shapes. If I wanted to get a little bit more playful, I can look to use the Polygonal Lasso tool, drawing point by point and crossing over spaces. So you see that starts to entangle in between the same shape. But when I go back to enclose and fill this space, I can use the fill. I'm going to create a new layer and click inside. Now I get a very creative looking shape, something different, not just keeping to the flat, boring, dull triangle, circle, and rectangles. But again, if I ever want to just create a shape that is going to maintain proportions, creating a perfect square, I have to hold down Shift to get that perfect shape. I'm going to make sure to create a new layer. And I'm going to use the paint bucket to fill inside that shape. If I wanted to cut out any areas, I can draw out a new shape on top. And then hit backspace or delete. Now we get that cutout, and we're starting to build out all these different shapes on top of each other. But we want to mix this up. If it's easier for you, you may want to consider building out all 25 layers. So you make sure that you have your minimum requirement. Then you can build a layer or a shape on top of each layer so you are filling up all those spaces. But when you're all done with this design, after you fill up all those shapes, you can absolutely have more than 25. You want to go up to File at the top navigation. We're going to first save this as a PDF. That's imperative. When you hit save as a PDF, it's going to save to your computer, your downloads. It may ask you for your computer to save it to a specific folder. For mine, because I'm using Mac, it's a little bit different. But I'm going to go from File down to Save as PSD. The PSD file is a Photoshop file. The whole point is that it will maintain all those layers. That's important because we're going to use this project all over again. We're going to open this same one back up. So save it as a PSD file, that Photoshop file, and then we can open it back up next time we have to work on this file. But we're going to then go back to the file, export as, and you can choose PNG, JPEG, or PDF. But we do not want to save it as SVG. We don't need to save it as a GIF. We need to have something that's going to simply maintain everything that we did for our design. I can hit save. And you see that it has this whole design filled in that space. It's a very simple shape. Just replicates it, combines everything into one. So Photopea is not necessarily difficult. You just have to kind of remember all the things that we learned from Photoshop in the beginning of the year. If you have any questions, feel free to email me. Have a great day.